Nick Bills, the Coaching and Pathways Manager for Cricket New South Wales, will welcome everyone in a minute, and we'll get the show on the road shortly thereafter. So we're ready to go in a minute or so. Again, if I could just have all videos and cameras off and your microphones on mute, please. Okay. 7 o'clock, Nick Bills, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Greg. Welcome again to everyone for being on this evening. It's great to have, I think I've seen the course list again, and we're somewhere close to around 60. And there's a lot of new members as well, new participants. So it's great for those of you who have participating for the first time. Welcome to the Cricket New South Wales Coach Education Series. Obviously, this pre-season, we're unable to go out and deliver our coach education and development as we would like to, face-to-face, but Greg, along with the other coaching and talent specialists within New South Wales, have put together a great little series of online education tools that you'll be able to take with you. There'll be some snippets of gold throughout you'll be able to take into your season next year. So, as I mentioned, Greg McLay will be presenting this one. Greg's the current coach and talent specialist for Riverina and Western area, southwest New South Wales. He's also a former first-class cricketer with New South Wales as well. So he'll be presenting you through part 2 of our effective coaching. And I have no doubt you'll take a lot out of the presentation. I've listened to it before, and it is a very, very good one. And I'd just like to also thank the other 7 coach and talent specialists from across Cricket New South Wales, who have been who have been very willing to put some time into this presentation. They've sat down with Greg and provided feedback on the presentation and helped put the content and the context together for this presentation. So without any further ado, I won't take up too much time. I'll leave you in Greg's capable hands and wish you all the very best for the evening and hope you have a great night.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, mate. Look, there's still some microphones that haven't been put on mute. Can you please make sure your microphones are on mute and your cameras are turned off, please? I can still hear some background noise there, so please turn your microphones on mute. Okay, perfect. So we'll get the show on the road. It's 2 minutes past 7, so everyone should be on by now. Look, as Nick alluded to, my name is Greg McLay. I'm the Coaching and Talent Specialist for Cricket New South Wales for Southwest New South Wales. And this is part 2 of our effective coaching series. Part 1 was expertly delivered by Brett Rankin last Wednesday. We received some fantastic feedback around webinar 1. Great job, Ranko. And I'm sure all the coaches that tuned into that got a lot out of that particular session. Now, I will be revisiting, some of the concepts that Brett touched on at the first webinar. If you're going through a sequence of how to become an effective coach, it's impossible to leave that kind of stuff out. So we're going to touch and revisit that as part of this presentation. We won't dig as deep as Brett did, but certainly we'll be revisiting it as part of this presentation. Look, the nature of webinars is that it makes it a pretty tricky exercise to respond to questions and to field questions as part of the webinar, especially when we're restricted for time and there's a lot of content to get through. So if I could please encourage every participant to note down questions that they might have or concepts that they may not be sure of, because at the end of the presentation, I'll be providing you contact details for each of the respective coach and talent specialists in New South Wales, both in metropolitan New South Wales and Sydney and in regional New South Wales. So there'll be an opportunity for you to connect with your coach and talent specialist at the conclusion of this presentation, and I'm sure they'll be happy to field any questions that you might have. Okay. What's going on here? Oh dear. Brett, I'm not actually able to scroll through here. Oh, there we go. Perfect. I'm not sure what happened there. Apologies for that. Look, just a bit of housekeeping first up. In the pre-reading, you would have noted that we're using Menti for the interactive component of this presentation tonight. So please make sure you got your phones handy and have put www.menti.com into your search bar so that we can interact via Menti through the course of the presentation. You'll be asked to submit a code. The code is 377663. As part of the presentation, we sent out some pre-reading to you. Can I ask for everyone's microphones to be on mute, please? The first of the pre-reading was Wayne Goldsmith clip, coaching philosophy. And there were also some questions accompanying that. We'll go through that shortly. We also sent out a core values matrix. Now, by no means is that matrix an exhaustive list of core values. Obviously, core values are very much an individual thing, but we provided that to you just as food for thought to just think about the kind of values that may make up your coach philosophy. And we're going to touch on the coach philosophy in the first part of this presentation. Hopefully, you've also downloaded the Cricket Australia coaching app and had an opportunity to have a look at the Catching Kayla clip, which will form part of the discussion around coaching effectiveness and the 4 Cs. So, in terms of outlining the webinar tonight and what are the 3 core components of the webinar, the first is, why do you coach? You know, the importance of having a coaching philosophy and the steps you need to follow to actually arrive at a relevant and specific to yourself coaching philosophy. The second part is around, what am I going to coach? You know, what sort of environment do the best coaches provide for their players? And the best coaches, there are consistent themes around the kind of environment that they do provide. So we're going to touch on that. And the final component of the presentation, we're going to look at, you know, how do you know if your training sessions are actually effective? So a great way to frame that is the 4 Cs. And we're going to talk about the 4 Cs of coaching effectiveness to conclude the presentation. First up, look, I think Brett may have actually introduced you to John Wooden at webinar 1. Now, John Wooden is a legendary coach. He is the primary source for creating an athlete-centered coaching philosophy. And when you talk about athlete-centered coaching philosophy, I think that quote actually says it all. You know, a good coach can change a game, a great coach can change a life. And I think even just looking at that quote, it gives you a feel for what an athlete-centered philosophy might actually entail. He's considered the greatest college basketball coach of all time. He's a mentor to many professional coaches in the US to this day. And his books and his philosophies, and, you know, they've helped also shape the coaching culture within Cricket New South Wales Pathways and the coach and talent specialist team. You know, we often talk about John Wooden, a lot of his quotes, most of us read the books, and I would encourage you to go out, seek books that have been written by John Wooden, because I guarantee you'll pick up quite a few tips from him. And as I say, he's a legendary coach and a great coach to model your coaching on. Again, can I just ask for microphones to be muted, please? I can still hear some background noise there. Thank you. Okay, I hope you have the Wayne Goldsmith coaching philosophy clip handy, the link. It's in the chat. It's in the chat room. I believe the link is in there. Sometimes it can be a little cumbersome loading it from that link, but we did send it out in pre-reading, and it's a message that's well worth revisiting as part of this chat. The video goes for about 2 minutes and 12 seconds. So what I would ask you to do is to open up your search bar, enter in the link, and let's have a look at that video again on your own computers in your own time, and we'll come back in about 2.5 minutes. So I'll see you then. Okay, just a couple more seconds and we'll get the show on the road again after having viewed that clip. And again, if I could please get everyone to just mute their microphones for me. Thank you. Okay. Hopefully we're all back and had time to have a look at that and revisit the Wayne Goldsmith clip. I actually really enjoy that clip. I think it really succinctly outlines the importance of having a well-established coaching philosophy, and hopefully you've had time to consider what your 3 whys are, and you've dug deep enough to be able to really nail it down. You know, and when I say nailing down the kind of the core values that might help shape your philosophy. It really is the most important step in becoming an effective coach. So I can't overstate the importance of spending sufficient time and reflecting on it as much as you possibly can to get it right. Your coaching philosophy, you know, guides your everyday coaching decisions and your everyday coaching actions. Your philosophy can be a few words or it can be a sentence. It's entirely up to you. But as I stated earlier, it needs to cut to the core of why you coach, and it must be linked to your personal values. It requires you to, as I said, it requires you to reflect, you know, and reflection is a really useful skill as a coach. You know, sometimes as a coach of a junior sporting team, you can kind of go from session to session to session and not spend time reflecting on what you've actually done. You know, in the process of reflecting, you're able to solve problems. You're able to fill the performance gaps that you might have in your coaching. It also allows you to reflect on the stuff that you got right, you know, and that's also a massive part of it. Making sure that when you do reflect, you do so with balance. There's stuff that you could get better, and there's stuff, you know, that you're doing pretty well at. So ensuring that you reflect often and in a balanced manner is really, really important as a coach. I'll give you time to read this slide. So these themes, this is actually based on a research piece with some multi-championship winning coaches in the United States, and coaches of the caliber of Phil Jackson, who has figured pretty prominently in the Last Dance special on Netflix, which I'm sure most of you have been watching. I certainly have been. I thought it was a fantastic series. And also Steve Kerr, he was involved in this research project, and he was a former player for the Bulls, and he's a fantastic coach in his own right now in the NBA. Now, look, it provides a high-performance coaching perspective, which is obviously going to be slightly different to a junior club coach. But there's a couple of areas in these themes which are, as I say, which are more linked to sort of high-performance work. We'll talk about those. But starting at the top, genuine care for players, consideration of their individual needs. You know, I think that speaks to empathy and making sure that, you know, you understand that every player is different. Both very, very important values and things to acknowledge as part of as being a coach. Point number 2, you know, togetherness, relationships. These are all values-based words as well. And that speaks to connection, to the team, to the sport, to the coach. Connection is a key outcome and something that we're going to talk more about later on as part of the 4 C's. Point 3, probably more of a high performance theme. For mine, and you may have a different bit, but for mine, very young players are better off experiencing all facets of the game of cricket, experiencing all the game of cricket has to offer. You know, we don't want them specialising too early. You know, they'll work that kind of stuff out. But that clear and defined roles for every player in the team. I guess if you were to link that back to a philosophy, it's around, you know, a team first ideology, play a role. Point 4, again, probably more high performance based, deep passion and drive for winning. You know, winning in itself is not a great way to pitch your philosophy, or you know, I'm sure you've seen junior coaches through your coaching journey who get caught up a little bit in the win at all cost mentality, and it isn't pretty. You know, it's actually embarrassing. So we want you to focus more on the environment that you might be able to create that may ultimately lead to success. But make no mistake, we don't define success as winning or losing. To me, at junior club level, success is growth and development and trying to nurture a love of the game in each of your players. To me, that is success. The wins and losses, that stuff will take care of itself if you provide the right environment. Point number 5, adoption of a leadership approach that fits their personality and values. Be authentic. I think that's what that speaks to. Be yourself. Don't try and be someone that you are not. Kids are pretty smart. They can work that kind of stuff out pretty quickly. So, be yourself. And point 6, perspective. Well, sport is a really useful vehicle to help shape character, but it shouldn't define who that person is. It really shouldn't. So perspective is also important. Again, I'll give you a little bit of time to have a look at that. So that's just a guide, if you like. It's a useful self-reflection tool and process to help devise your philosophy. It's a step-by-step guide. In terms of what my philosophy is, for what it's worth, my philosophy is know the player, coach the game. I find that when I develop a deeper understanding of each of my players, their likes, their dislikes, background, home environment, their preferred learning style, all of these things, that kind of information, that suite of information helps shape how I coach that player. And it allows their game to grow and develop more readily if I've done that, if I've spoken to them about that. Now, it's not a case of sitting them down and asking them step by step all of these questions. Those sort of conversations happen intuitively, I find. When you just start a conversation with a player and ask questions, you can lead that conversation where you need it to be. And that's a great way of establishing a background around each of your players and knowing the player better so that you can coach the game better. Again, I'll just pause here and allow you time to have a look at some of these quotes. I'm a bit of a quote nuffy when it comes to good coaches. I love reading about coaches and what they have to say about the game. I just want you to, when you read through these quotes, I want you to have a think about how those coaching values in each of those coaches might actually be reflected in those quotes. I think you can draw correlations there, and we're going to have a look at a few quotes, 3 quotes. And I want you to think about the kind of values, the words that come to your mind when you actually look at that quote. And I want you to use Menti for that too. So make sure you got your phones handy. When we get to those slides, you'll be prompted to enter the words that, might define that actual quote in terms of a coaching values. I'll cite Jack Gibson's quote as an example. Played strong, done fine. It's only 4 words. But to me, that exemplifies Jack Gibson's philosophy. It sort of talks to his emphasis on work ethic, how much he values work ethic, played strong, done fine. I think the whole quote speaks of simplicity. And my knowledge of Jack Gibson was that he was a man of few words, but when he did actually say something, there was a sort of certain profoundness to it. And I think, whether he was addressing his players or the media, it was very, very true to himself from that perspective, and that kind of defined his coaching style as well, keeping it pretty simple. So when I show you the next 3 quotes, I want you to have a think about the values that you could align with those quotes. So the first one, we go to Menti and make sure you've got the code entered so that we can get into this component. In your opinion, what core values are contained within the quote, "Don't die with the music in you," from Wayne Bennett? And I want you to enter those words. And as you enter those words, our screen will start filling up with those words. So please put your words in. Perfect. Fantastic. The beauty of Menti, and we're seeing it here, you keep going, the word, the bigger the words, the more people have actually used that word. So passion is obviously a pretty consistent theme amongst all of the audience, and I don't disagree. A very passionate coach. If you have a quick look through some of those other words, you know, commitment, expression, potential, couldn't agree more. You know, it's about realising your potential, work ethic, agreed, sacrifice, never say die. You know, these are all very closely linked, I think, to what Wayne Bennett's philosophy would be. And I think you're on the button here. You're well on the right track here. Good stuff. We might just go into the second quote. So this is from Leah Poulton, who's recently been appointed the head of female cricket at Cricket New South Wales. And she's, welcome back, Leah. We're fantastic to have Leah back at Cricket New South Wales. Her quote, "We are in the people business. When I'm dealing with someone, it's not just as a cricketer, but also as a person." What does that speak to? What do you reckon Leah, from a values perspective, holds dear from a philosophy point of view? Brilliant, brilliant. Switched on audience tonight. Relationships, connection, empathy. That's what I had as well. Understanding, perfect. It also talks to everyone is different as well, doesn't it? Relationship building, emotional intelligence. Wow, that's an often sought after attribute in all coaches. Best out of people, humanity. Absolutely. And if you were to know Leah, you would absolutely relate all of those values back to her. You know, it's a very easy correlation to make. Again, can I just please ask all microphones to be on mute, please? Okay, we'll move into the next quote. And this one is from John Wooden, one of my favourites. Isn't it amazing how much can be accomplished when no one cares who gets the credit? Humility, love it. We before me. I reckon I'll have an idea who that might be. Selflessness, yes. Brilliant. Outstanding. Look, we're on the right track, and which is great, because just having an understanding of, you know, linking values to your coaching philosophy, it's the most important step. And it sounds as though, and it certainly looks to me, that you're all very much on the right track insofar as taking the first step to devising your own coaching philosophy. Again, we sent the core values matrix out. By no means an exhaustive list. There are others. So, you know, as I say, the values have got to reflect what you hold dear. So making sure that you reflect, spend time working through it. And actually, at the end of the presentation, we're going to provide you with contact details for your coach and talent specialist in your region. And we'd love you to connect with those people and talk to them around what your philosophy is. So again, that's something we'll do towards the end of the presentation. But brilliant, that worked magnificently. Okay, so now that you have a coaching philosophy, or you're well on the road to having a coaching philosophy, let's see if it aligns nicely with the concept of player-centered coaching. Now, player-centered coaching did figure quite prominently at webinar 1, and Brett Rankin did dig quite deep on it. We're going to touch on it here because, as I say, we need to revisit it as part of this process, and then we'll move on to the next part of the presentation. So, what is player-centered coaching? Again, I'll pause here and allow you time to read. So effective player-centered coaching can really have a profound impact on players, and it can deliver a lot of desirable outcomes. If you were to provide an overarching sort of statement or outcome on the benefits of player-centered coaching, I reckon it can be encapsulated in one quote: good people, not just good athletes. The environment helps promote that. Or, as we kind of say in Cricket New South Wales, in terms of our ethos, it's around character over cover drive. And that really does speak to the heart of what a player-centered philosophy is. And I think the second slide I showed you of John Wooden's quote, I think that encapsulates what a player-centered philosophy is. And it's no surprise that he actually came up with the player-centered philosophy in the first place. So we touched on player-centered coaching. Now we go to the next step. So now that we have a coaching philosophy and we know that it links nicely to those player-centered coaching principles, let's now look at the kind of environment that we should provide our team as the coach. So I'm going to show you 4 slides. Each slide has a typical activity that we might find at a junior training session. Certainly I see them at junior training sessions that I attend. So when we have a look at each activity, I want you to consider, there's only 4 slides, 4 activities. Consider what percentage of an ordinary training session each activity might represent. And that's an ordinary sort of middle of the season kind of training session. So I'll show you the slides first up and the activities, and then I'll show you some further slides where you can actually use Menti to provide a percentage around those activities in terms of the training sessions that you run. So the first activity is a squad net session. Okay, so that's a squad net session is just batters versus bowlers, really. Batters normally change after 5 or 10 minutes of batting, and bowlers, it might be 3 or 4 or 5 per net, and they just take it in turns to bowl. So that's the first activity. The second activity is a net scenario. And now a scenario, for those that aren't familiar with what a scenario is essentially a snapshot of a situation within a game. And so the one that you can see on the screen here is an end of innings scenario when the batting team's kind of looking to move the game along. Bowlers might set a field. What I do is have a photocopied bit of paper with a picture of a cricket ground on it with the inner ring as well. And I actually ask the bowlers to set the field and make sure the batsman's aware of it. Now, what then happens is the batter responds to the bowler's plans and their fields that they've set, and it's important that we keep score, okay, for this kind of a scenario. So that's a net scenario. The third activity is group drilling. So it can be batting, bowling, fielding drills. So I think we all are pretty much familiar with what drilling looks like. The last activity, games. So games can be a whole range of things. They could be tip and run, which is a good game to practice running between wickets especially, or junior formats games. Could be a stage 1 or stage 2 junior format game because, depending on your age group and who you're coaching and the abilities of your players, stage 1, stage 2 might be a fantastic game to run as part of a centre wicket session. So they're the 4 activities. So now we're going to go through on the Menti slide. So you're going to need your phone for this. I want you to affix a percentage of your session that you would dedicate initially to a net session. So to give us a percentage, you just need to move the blue cursor along on your screen, and what we'll end up seeing is the overall average. So go ahead. So about half of us have responded. So we'll just wait for the other half or so. Okay, well, let's say 40%. Alrighty, we'll move to the next activity, which is a scenario. So what percentage of a regular training session would you do scenarios for? Okay. So that's about 30%, or roughly 30%. Alrighty, well, let's move to our third activity, group drilling. So what percentage of your regular training session would you be doing drilling for? Okay. So we'll say about 25% for drilling. And the last activity, games. Okay, so we've got about 35% there. Now, obviously, all these percentages are based on averages, so they don't add up to 100%. But what I can actually glean from this is most of our time is spent with a net session. The next amount of time is playing games, then scenarios, then drills. Look, to be fair, I think that's reasonable balance. I really do. Like, my personal preference would be to have more of a focus on scenarios and games as opposed to nets, just a normal net. And I'm going to talk about the range of positive outcomes that you can derive from games and scenarios a little bit later in the presentation. But I just want you to park this and think about why games, why scenarios might be the preferred option. Okay. Obviously, when it comes to percentages, there are some things to consider. There's some variables, and I acknowledge that. Sometimes you may not even be able to access a centre wicket. You might just have access to nets. So what I want you thinking more along the lines of is, instead of just having a net session where batters face bowlers and they take it in turns and batters bat for 5 or 10 minutes, think about how you can introduce more purpose into those sessions. So, for example, if you had 3 nets, maybe consider a couple of scenarios in 2 of the nets, yeah, and maybe some drills, throwing drills or back foot drills or whatever it might be in the 3rd net. Scenarios deliver a lot better outcomes than just a net, where people tend to go through the motions a little bit. Again, I'm going to talk about that in a little more detail later on. The other thing that you need to consider is squad size. Sometimes if you've got a really small squad, it's not healthy to have them bowling, young fast bowlers in a net for an hour just bowling, because that hurts our young quicks, and we need to look after our young quicks. So small numbers can limit kind of what you can do as well, and I understand that. I guess the other factor that needs to be taken into account is the time of the year. So as a coach, if you're new to a group, the start of the year might be a good time to work on connectedness and getting to know your players. But generally, and in the middle of the year, by the time you've actually got some intelligence around your players and what they do well and the sort of areas that they can improve and grow in, those kind of observations can help dictate what you do at your sessions. That makes the training relevant and really pitched specifically to your group. So what is the ideal balance during the season? We're going to talk about that soon and provide examples. And the CA app, we'll be talking about that and how useful that is in arriving at that. So I'm going to allow you time to read this slide as well. So this is a wrap up of an ideal environment, if you like, and what a session should look like. So working clockwise from the top right-hand corner of your screen, effective use of nets in the outfield to achieve skill development outcomes. Look, I think using nets in outfield in smaller groups, it keeps kids physically and mentally active. And we need to try and do that as much as we possibly can to increase the level of motivation during the session. It's easy for kids to kind of get distracted if they're not doing anything. So keeping them physically and mentally active during the course of the session, really, really important. So moving around that loop, player contributions, leadership-led activities. I think one of the skills of coaching is actually not directing kids what to do, but actually asking questions to arrive at the answer that you want. So not giving them the answers straight up, but directing the conversation where it needs to go with questions as opposed to telling them directly. So it's good to involve players, in the sense of giving them a sense of ownership of the session. Once they have that, they're more likely to actually bring their A games to training, which is what we want. The CA app, what a fantastic resource. I can't speak highly enough of the CA app. It's a resource that I use a lot, and I know the coach and talent specialist team does as well. Look, the CA app provides entire session plans with activities, video links to activities, and session outcomes. It's a fantastic resource to ensure your environment is player-centered. So moving around that loop again, balance of playing games and game-like drills and scenarios. Balance is really, really important. Not just focusing on one activity throughout a session. Again, that will affect the motivation levels of your group. And the last point, working in small groups, performing every aspect of the activity, again, speaks to that motivation, doesn't it? Maximum participation prevents boredom, helps keep kids engaged and connected to the game, their teammates, and you as the coach. So we're going to need our phones for this next component, which is the CA app. So please, can we grab our phones, and we're going to open up the CA coaching app. Yeah. We're going to click on training plans. And then we're going to click on my session plans. And if you have a look down, there's a whole range of sessions there, but we're going to click on session plan number 5. So again, what I really enjoy about this app is it actually provides you an overview of what the outcomes are likely to be if you do this session. But the other part of it that I like is that it breaks up the session into 10-minute increments, and then the final session takes 20 minutes. But if you click on each of the activities in there, it actually takes you to a video which demonstrates exactly how to set up and run that particular activity. So there's a very, very little margin for error. And what I really like about the CA coaching app, as well as myriad of sessions that you can choose from and outcomes that you can actually drive from the CA app and the activities within, it actually allows you as a junior club coach to develop coaching confidence. And coaching confidence is a fantastic thing to strive for, because as you develop coaching confidence, you gain a deeper understanding of the game and also the kind of activities that work best for your group to improve their competence. And when you're actually implementing activities that really stimulate and engage your players, their love of the game develops. If the only outcome you drive as a coach is that young players develop a deep love of the game, wow, that is a big box to tick as far as I'm concerned. I think that's a fantastic outcome. The other thing about it is there's a heap of things to choose from in that app. And to really understand what it can offer you, you really should immerse yourself in it and navigate your way around the app, just to gauge exactly every aspect and every component of that app that you can use as part of your coaching and part of your coaching growth. So it's a fantastic resource, the CA app. Alrighty, let's revisit the steps that we've taken so far. We have a sound coaching philosophy, and we know it links nicely to player-centered coaching principles, and we have a better understanding of an effective training environment. So now let's move into the final part of the webinar, and let's have a look at the kind of outcomes we should be aiming for as a junior club coach. Unfortunately, we don't have time to play the entire Catching Kayla clip, but I really, really like that clip because there's some really powerful messages within the clip, and it kind of gives you a feel for the impact that a good coach can actually have on an athlete. So part of the pre-reading, as well as having a look at the clip, was to prompt you to think about how Kayla's coach effectively delivered the 4C outcomes of coaching effectiveness. So they are competence, confidence, connection, and character. And I also provided a little bit more context around what each of those 4Cs are so that you could more readily draw the link between what the coach was doing with Kayla and those 4Cs. Often when I talk to people involved with junior cricket, and I've talked to a range of people in a range of different capacities, but quite often when I ask, what do you do at the club? And I'll often say, I'm just a club coach, just a club coach. I think just a club coach, it's a real tricky role. There's so many hats that you actually have to wear, whether you're aware of it or not. But just looking at some of the attributes that a junior club coach kind of needs, you need the ability to cater for the needs of a wide range of personalities and abilities. I know when kids come into the higher parts of the pathway, and I'm fortunate enough to coach some of those kids. Generally, when they come into our programs, what you see is a pretty compressed skill set. They're good, but there's not a massive range in terms of the best and the worst, or least skilled, I should say. But when kids are starting out, and when you're a junior club coach, that range can be quite significant, and that is tricky to coach. And that's why the CA app is so useful, because irrespective of the ability of the player, there's an activity there that's going to cater for them. It's a brilliant thing. What else do junior club coaches do? Well, they're teachers of kids, they're managers, generally of parents, they're umpires, they can be scorers, coordinators, they're events managers, they're administrators. There's so many hats to wear. Unfortunately, sometimes a junior club coach is actually the key person in a kid's life who provides direction around behavioural boundaries and values. And I guess if ever you needed reinforcing of the importance of linking your coaching philosophy to values, then this is it. If you're portraying the kind of values that you hold dear, then through stealth almost, the kids pick up on that, and they work and they train and they play within that framework, and that can have a profound impact on some kids. The other thing about junior club coaching is the foundation skills are formed at this level. The basics. This is the base for their games. So it's a really important time in their cricketing development. You generally need to combine the coaching commitment with your own family and work commitments as well, which is a juggling act, and it's tricky. And also, you probably don't get a lot of credit or acknowledgement for all of this stuff that you do, as opposed to perhaps high performance coaches who, we're the ones that benefit from the hard work that junior club coaches do. We add polish to those players' games, but the core of those players' games is actually developed at junior club level. So just a club coach? I don't think so. So this is a model for coaching effectiveness. Yeah. Again, I think this slide may have been in Brett's presentation as well. It's just a really good model for you to base your coaching around. So it's handy to know. I'm going to just look at each of these 4Cs in a little more detail. This is the slide that I sent out as part of pre-reading. I'll allow you a chance to just read through that again. So competence, there's 4 prongs to competence: technical, tactical, physical, and mental competence. Okay. Point 2, confidence. So a player-centered coaching environment promotes confidence, as can obviously, developing your skills, your competence, that can obviously provide confidence as well. But there's a whole range of ways that you can actually influence confidence. One thing that I've done with groups that I've coached is what they call a confidence circle, where you have your team members in a circle and you have a piece of paper taped to their back, and you ask each of the team members to go around and write on that piece of paper why team members really like and enjoy having you in the team. What are your strengths? And just a little simple exercise like that, it's amazing the impact that that can have in terms of the group dynamic, as well as each individual player's confidence. So there's a whole range of ways that we can drive confidence as an outcome. Connection, you know, I've highlighted generate lifelong lovers of the game, because again, I think I mentioned it earlier, what an outcome, you know. So an environment that builds lifelong lovers of the game, in my opinion, is the most important outcome to strive for from junior club coaches. Why? Well, you know, they can be a good player as a consequence of that. But everyone's playing career, you know, it's a finite thing. There's a point where they finish playing. And if they're a lifelong lover of the game, you know what those players become? They become coaches like you and I, or an umpire, or they become a scorer or an administrator. You know, all of those roles, including coaching and playing, are really crucial to the health of this game and well-being of this great game. So, you know, there's a lot of flow-on effects of people, of kids, you know, developing a deep love of the game at a young age. And character. You know, I've highlighted humility here, and I noticed humility was in one of the slides that we had earlier in the show, earlier in the presentation. And to me, you know, all of the positive character traits that you see there, you know, they're fantastic. But for mine, if I was to choose one, humility is the one that I really enjoy. You know, I think when I see kids that are humble, they're more readily committed to the team cause. Yep. And their ability to grow and develop as players, I think, is a little more accelerated, because kids who possess humility, they ask themselves, and actually ask the coach after a session or after a training program, they actually ask themselves, you know, how can I actually do that better? And that's a really good question to ask yourself. What that suggests to me is a growth mindset. Someone that, you know, in the right environment is really going to flourish. What can happen sometimes with kids that, you know, maybe ego overrides the humility component is, you know, they rarely ask themselves those kinds of questions. And I'm not suggesting that, you know, people with ego or an overbearing ego can't be successful cricketers, because there are examples of that. But for mine, when I've seen kids in the pathway that haven't quite got that balance right, the kids with ego tend to hit a bit of a ceiling, and they get overtaken by the kids that do have humility in spades. So if I was to choose one, humility would be it for mine. The 4 C's. Okay. I've got a whole series of slides coming up, and I want you to click on the C at the base of the page. You'll see the 4 C's. I want you to click on the C that you think is the principal or major outcome for the activity that I actually provide. Okay, so there's a whole range of activities. It can be training based or the sort of activities you see at Clubland. So I want you to affix the principal for one of the 4 C's to that particular activity, and then we'll have a bit of a chat. So the first one, so you're going to need your phones. We're going to be using Menti for this. So what do you think the C is, the principal C for a 2 kilometre time trial? What do you think that is? Fantastic. Look, I agree. I think physical competence is the principal outcome. But for those of you that have put character in and confidence, I understand that. Like, if you improve at a 2 kilometre time trial, then that will give you confidence, doesn't it? To me, though, the principal outcome is around physical competence. The character part, I also get that. You know, a 2K time trial is not an easy thing to do. So it stretches you. It really asks you to push yourself. And that can be character building. I do understand that, and I acknowledge that as well. But for mine, the principal outcome here is competence. Good job. We'll go to the next activity. Facing a bowling machine and hitting offside drives only. What C do you think that is linked to? Spot on. Absolutely spot on. Look, the thing that drives the outcome here is context, okay? So in kids that are at junior club level and are kind of beginning the game and learning the foundation skills, then I agree. There is a competence outcome with that because they're developing their foundation skills and their range of shots. So yes, in young players that are learning about the game, I agree, there is a competence outcome. For more advanced players, like the better skilled players, the pathway sort of level players, I agree. I think you're not actually ticking a competence box there, you're ticking a confidence box because all you're doing is reinforcing the stuff that they're generally already good at. You know, even I, as an ordinary batsman, love facing a bowling machine that's lobbing them half volleys outside off stump and I'm hitting cover drives. But really all I'm doing is, you know, pumping up my own confidence. Okay, so context drives the outcome here. So that's an important point to remember. Next one. A centre wicket game where the players make the rules for the game. What's the C here? Okay, look, that's interesting. I agree. Connection is one of the outcomes. Is it the principal outcome? Possibly. You know, generally when you see a centre wicket game where the kids make up the rules, there's a lot of noise, isn't there? There's a lot of noise. So they are connecting more closely to the game and their teammates and possibly the coach. So I don't dispute that. But I actually think a more even spread of C outcomes is really obtainable here with a centre wicket game. Even though the players are making the rules, if you're playing a centre wicket game of any type, then all skills are being practiced. You know, your technical and your tactical competence, especially. You know, when you're playing games and you set a field, then there can't help but be tactical outcomes as a consequence of that, and technical ones as well. So I think there is some competence outcomes there. I think there are some confidence outcomes here too. You think about that environment. It's a non-threatening environment where kids are not afraid to make mistakes and try new things. And that's a really good environment for a kid to develop in. So I think there's some confidence outcomes there as well. And character, agree. I think with character, games generally can reveal character more readily than other activities, say just a net session. I think I glean more from games in terms of knowing the player than I do from any regular run-of-the-mill training session. So for mine, I agree, connection is probably the principal outcome, but I would probably have a more even spread across the 4 Cs. And when you get an even spread across the 4 Cs, I think that is a pretty good outcome and activity to think about incorporating into your sessions. So we'll move on to the next one. An induction presentation at your first training session where you talk about the standards expected of your team. What's the C there? Spot on. Connection and character, the 2 principal outcomes there, no doubt about it. Not a bad idea too. I'm not sure if you have inductions at your club, but I think it's a fantastic way to set the scene for the season ahead. We'll move on to the next slide. A net session with bowlers and batters. So just a net session. What are the C's here? Okay. It's an interesting one. Again, a net session with just bowlers and batters, context is important. So if it's a beginner who is learning their foundation skills, so learning how to bowl, learning how to bat, I agree there are some competence outcomes there, technical competence outcomes there. I think though, if you're just having a net session with no scenarios and no purpose, to me, in the better players, they tend to gravitate towards the things they do well, as opposed to the stuff that makes them feel uncomfortable and the stuff that they're probably not so good at. So when they gravitate to the things that they do well, I think the major outcome there is confidence. They just tend to go to the stuff that, the shots that they play well and the balls that they can execute consistently, as opposed to the kind of things that are going to grow their bubble as a player. So context drives the outcomes with that one as well. Next, having a former club member speak to the players about the club, its history, great players, and what the club stands for. Again, I agree. Yeah, I can see where that's heading. I mean, it is a connection and character piece, and both of those outcomes are fantastic. Look, for mine, I don't know. It might just because I'm an old bugger, but the history of the game. Like as a kid, it was something I really did enjoy studying. And learning about the great series that were played, and the Worrell Benno series, for example, and the fact that I think Melbourne had a ticker tape parade for the West Indian team. I mean, it's unheard of in this day and age. Things like the Bodyline series or the Aboriginal tour to England in the late 1800s, the first ever cricket tour of England by Australians. I reckon it's a fantastic thing to impart on our players or promote within our young players is to at least have a look at the history of the game. And it's great series, it's great players. I mean, young players, they are the custodians of the game. They are the ones that are playing the game. I think to know where they want to take the game, they sort of need to understand where the game has been to an extent. I also think, immersing yourself in the history of the game, I think it promotes a greater respect and love for the game as well. And I think that is a brilliant outcome. So, history of the game, have a think about that, how you can work that into your program in terms of your junior coaching. So the next one, a net session, where you build in a scenario. Example, batting and bowling in death overs, so the last few overs, chasing a set target and setting a field. What are the C outcomes there? Pretty close. I think there's some connection outcomes here as well, but certainly competence. When you build purpose into a training session, as you do with a scenario, you're hitting a few boxes insofar as competence. You remember earlier we talked about, competence has 4 prongs to it: technical, tactical, mental, and physical. Well, I think in this case, technical, tactical, and mental, I think decision making. I think it ticks a few boxes. So certainly competence is an outcome, and we actually go quite deep within that outcome within a net session scenario. Confidence, I agree. The player, in a game, when confronted with that scenario in a game, the player has actually practiced for that. They've actually experienced what that feels like. They know what batting and bowling at the death kind of looks like and what they need to do. So when they're confronted with that in a match, they actually draw and derive a lot of confidence from that. So yes, confidence is a fantastic outcome. I think connection as well. I know no one has put connection in, but I think as long as kids are developing a deeper understanding of the game, the love of the game kind of, moves along with that. So I think connection is actually an outcome there because they are developing a deeper understanding of the game. And certainly character, I think that's another outcome here. We see how kids respond to certain game situations and pressure, and I think, as we've said earlier, games and scenarios are actually a good mode to actually extract that kind of information. So for mine, this net session with a scenario actually hits all 4 C's. So what does that actually say? Well, to me, it actually says that, again, this is an activity well worth considering for your training sessions. And as I said earlier in the presentation, you know, two of the attributes of an effective player-centered environment are games and scenarios, okay? And there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is because it does drive a lot of different outcomes. And not only just does it touch on the outcomes, it actually delves quite deeply into them, as we see here for competence. So again, this is a session I thoroughly recommend to consider. You consider incorporating into most of your sessions if you have the scope to do so. Okay, a T20 batting expression session where kids are encouraged to try funky shots played by their heroes on TV. A reverse sweep, a slog sweep, using the crease to access different areas of the ground. What do you reckon? Cool. So we've got all 4 C's here again, which is fantastic to see because, you know, probably some coaches would roll their eyes at, oh, you know, why would I want to incorporate that into my training sessions? But to me, you know, kids have loved emulating their heroes since the game was invented. You know, certainly I did, and my much bigger and much older brother did. You know, he got to play the Australian team, and I had to be the West Indies or the England or New Zealand teams, and that's okay because I didn't mind. I just loved emulating any international cricketer. So, you know, connection was a massive piece of this. Confidence, well, they're trying new skills. It's a non-threatening environment where mistakes are welcomed and seen as a key part of the skill development process. I think I've heard that before. That's a player-centered coaching environment. And competence, well, they actually are increasing their range of shots. And to be fair, T20 is a fantastic format of the game, and it's a format that we often see in the pathway and at club level. So why wouldn't we provide an opportunity for kids to actually practice those skills? You know, not only is it a fun thing to do, and kids, you know, love doing it, it is actually, you know, a game by stealth. It is improving their competence from that perspective. And it's certainly a format that they're going to be exposed more to the higher up the pathway they actually go. And to be honest, the people that actually end up playing first-class cricket, their entry into that level of cricket generally is by a T20 because of the number of teams within Australia. So why not practice it? Righto. Talking about the death overs, I think we're into the last over here. So let's summarise. You know, what are the sequences we've followed here to arrive at becoming a more effective coach? Well, the first one was, why do you coach? Your coaching philosophy, it guides your everyday coaching decisions and actions. The second point of this presentation, the most effective coaches apply player-centered coaching principles into their programs and their sessions. The third component, the environment a coach provides is really important to promote growth and development and generate lifelong lovers of the game. And we talked in detail around the benefits of that. And the final point, the 4 C's. What a great way to base your planning for training sessions and training programs. Really is. So they are the 4 steps and the sequence to becoming a more effective coach. Right, to wrap things up, how long have we been going for? We've been going for just over an hour, which is perfect. Look, I really want to sincerely thank you for joining us in this webinar series, not just tonight and not just for last week, but what is actually to come. My fellow coach and talent specialists have got a range of webinars coming up, and so exciting. We spoke about a few of them today, so there's a lot to look forward to, and I encourage you to make sure that you register for the upcoming ones as well. What you see here are each of the coach and talent specialist contact details. So again, if you have any questions, please approach your respective coach and talent specialist in the area that you live in, and their details are there. As part of that process though, I would really like you to think about what your coach philosophy is going to look like. Please spend the rest of this week thinking around and trying to articulate what your coach philosophy is going to be. And each of our coach and talent specialists look forward to receiving those so that we can have a bit of a chat about that as well, if that's something you need to do. But please put it in writing and send it through to us. And we'd love to have a look at it and talk to you around that. Look, in closing, good luck with your coaching journey. As I say, please stay in the loop around the upcoming webinar series that we have coming. And as I say, I'll see you around at the cricket fields throughout the summer. There's a lot to look forward to this summer. I'm sure we'll get a lot of cricket played. And as I say, good luck. And thank you for tuning in tonight. See you.